you guys liking the shelf, by the way? How's this striking your interest? I'm just wondering. Switching up the dynamics of the backgrounds, I could put stuff on that and rotate it out, you know? Let me know what you think. Either way, hello world of YouTube, and welcome to the listening log update for August of 2021. We have 10 albums to talk about today. Some new stuff, some requests, and some just general range of quality. Let's go ahead and get started, though. Lingua Ignota, singer-songwriter, experimental musician, dropped one of my favorite albums of the decade in 2019 with Caligula, a record that saw her purging a lot of emotions in a very intense fashion, you know, whether through her passionate singing or her harsh screaming juxtaposed against these classical pieces. It was a brilliant, beautifully harsh experience that really puts you in the mindset of her while writing the songs that she was writing. And when she announced that she was doing a follow-up, Sinner Get Ready, to drop this year, I got immediately stoked. And while I wasn't expecting it to sound like Caligula, I'm very happy with the direction that this record takes and how different it feels from Caligula, because the harshness fit Caligula. It felt like a Greek tragedy. And this new record, Sinner Get Ready, feels more like a classical play on display. You know, a lot of the orchestration still has that classical touch. It's a lot more nuanced and has a lot more going on in it in a way that lends itself to being a backdrop to the thematics. The thematics this time being sort of an outcast, an outlier in a religious sense. You know, being cast out by religion. You know, there's some real pain felt on repent now, confess now, you know, giving yourself up to the church. You know, I Who Bend the Tall Grass has this theatricality to it that transcends feeling like I'm just listening to a record. You know, the power that Kristen Hayter feels like she's pushing out vocally and intimidating wise, lyrically, is astounding. I love the passion on this project. You know, the crescendo that builds in Pennsylvania Furnace is beautiful. And, you know, while I don't necessarily relate to the lyrics, I can, you know, I see that I still appreciate where they're coming from. In the same way that I did Caligula. You know, I'm not a child raised in the church. I wasn't raised in any religion. You know, I know I've talked about being Jewish and Judaism being a part of my heritage. And it's something that I'm proud of, but it's not necessarily something that I practice. You know, I've never had a bar mitzvah. I've never participated in birthright. You know, I don't really do Shabbat. I know we just had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur's around the corner, but I observe them. I don't really celebrate them, you know. A lot of organized religion as a whole hasn't really been something that I've engaged with as a person, and same with growing up. And while it does make me feel alienated, it's records like this that really I enjoy because they show that stark contrast. I know there's a lot of records that deconstruct religion and go against religion or talk about organized religion in a negative sense, but the way that Kristen Hayter does it on here just supersedes a lot of that. This is an incredible record that I feel like really, again, embodies that same feeling I got from Caligula, but in such a different sense. Like I said, this record at points transcends just a regular listening experience. You know, I've seen people talk about this album feeling like a religious experience, and I get that. You know, as the drones wash over me in the sacred lineament of judgment, it just feels like I'm being sent through a vortex of beauty and pain. The evolving landscape in Man Is Like a Flower gives me a very similar feeling as well. You know, the spoken word into the intimacy that transcends into this beautiful layered musical piece is nothing short of serene. I think that this record is incredible. I am floored at how beautiful this thing is. And again, I just like how Kristen utilizes her voice on this. You know, you feel the pain, you feel the beauty, you feel the betrayal, all of it. It's incredible. And I think that this record is phenomenal. I like it as much as Caligula. I'm giving it another 10. It's so good. It is that next step when it comes to like really cementing a listener and experience. You know, this is that, what a lot of critics talk about, this is that. And I could see it being a really hard listen for people in the same way that Caligula was. but for very different reasons. And similarly, I gave you that caveat. Listen at your own leisure, at your own risk. Seriously.
Bags of Levis, she praying she don't get abandoned.
You know, I'd argue Nas's King's Disease was in my top 10 of hip-hop albums that dropped last year. I thought it was a really consistent batch of tracks that saw Nas coming together with Hit Boy and making some tracks that saw him reflecting in some really honest and well-constructed and personal ways. And King's Disease 2, a sequel I wasn't expecting to happen, let alone so soon, also produced by Hit Boy, is more of the same in all of the best ways possible. You know, the production on here feels like it's doing even more to reflect and go even farther back in the hip-hop time machine. I think Nas and Hit Boy just have this really good dynamic with the rapper-producer combo. And again, Nas is very reflective in some ways that I think are great to see an artist that has been in the game for this long reflect on. You know, he reflects on squashing his beef with Pac on Death Row East, which was a well-written, well-told story, in my opinion, with a great beat behind it. You know, as somebody who has liked Nas and Tupac for a long time and has been a hip-hop fan for a while, I just appreciated that song. I like how he's resurrecting sort of other old aspects in old school golden age hip-hop, like having EPMD on a track that also features Eminem. But EPMD come in and kill their feature on here. You know, he brought Lauryn Hill, Miss Lauryn Hill, on Nobody, one of the best songs I may have heard all year. She comes in with some real heat and self-reflection in a similar way to what Nas is doing on the record, you know, and I really appreciate that. He brings some newer rappers in on a very old-school 80s-inspired beat on YKTV that evolves into this modern trap beat so incredibly well, and I think Boogie with a Hoodie and YG do a great job on that. I don't know, I just really like a lot of what this record has going forth on it. You know, I like it about as much as King's Disease 1, and I really liked King's Disease 1. You know, I think it's cool to see one of my favorite rappers who's still consistent. You know, while a lot of people are throwing Busta up there as another dude who's had a long-standing legacy, still churning out some pretty quality tracks, I like that Nas, comparatively also from an older era, is in a later part of his career and is just having a great run. You know, I liked King's Disease 1. I know Nazir was kind of divisive with people, but I liked a lot of components from it. I really enjoyed Life is Good as well. You know, Nas is just having a great tail end of his career, or at least new era. He's had a new era of excellence, in my opinion, as far as his output. And King's Disease 2, while being a great sequel and companion to a record that I really enjoyed from last year, also just further cemented his greatness as a rapper as far as storytelling, rhymes, you know, the fact that he can do stuff like Rare, which again has this old school spin, not too far from the track listing from a track like 40 Side that sees him adorning a lot more of a contemporary flow and lyrically writing about how he's still looked upon as relevant and important in hip-hop and for what he's doing, you know, for the culture. And I appreciate that. You know, and similarly to King's Disease 1, there's just a stretch of tracks that I don't think have as much hit, you know, and most of it's in the back half. You know, while I like Count Me In and No Phony Love, you know, there's just parts of the back half that don't feel as strong as the front half. But it's still quality release. This record's great. It's another great record. It's an 8 out of 10. Like, I'm really... This month has been... When it's been good, it's been really good, and the new Nas album is a great example of that. Shocking surprise, but a great sequel nonetheless. Different surprise I really wasn't expecting, given Jesse's back in Killswitch. Times of Grace are back. Adam Dukowitz and Jesse Leach's band, where they added a third member. Dan Gluzak from Envy on the Coast joined the band between their debut from 10 years ago, The Hymn of a Broken Man, and their newest album, Songs of Loss and Separation. Now, I enjoyed Hymn of a Broken Man a decent amount. You know, I like Killswitch, and I was curious about it at the time, and I thought it was really cool to hear Adam with Jesse again, and they presented things a little differently. And while they're still doing that on this Times of Grace record, I don't enjoy it quite as much. Songs of Loss and Separation certainly sees them still pulling together some decent ideas. You know, the 1-2 punch of Rescue and Far From Heavenless smacks really hard. The throttling energy from Rescue carries really well into the slow heaviness of Far From Heavenless. Medusa's probably the best use of the beefier song portions that coat this record. And the production's fine. You know, the guitars have a decent bite, the drums have a decent punch, the bass, when it's there, rattles decently enough. But this record is so much more boring. This album really tries to focus on the slow burn in a way that I don't think warrants the length of some of these tracks. You know, the opener alone, The Burden of Belief, I feel like I was convinced into liking by the end of its 6-minute runtime. And there's other tracks like Bleed Me and Cold that feel like they're integrating a little more of an alternative, like a 2000s alternative sound into their own Dukowitz Leachisms, but I don't think that they pull off that sound all that well. I've been really distant from enjoying any attributes from handfuls of stuff like that, and I feel like their contributions don't do anything to warm me back up to those sounds. You know, I think he does fine vocally, and Adam does okay from the guitar front, and I think that Dan's drums, they're good. I didn't really like this record. I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was really boring. You know, the points that spice up, sure, they're really nice, but they're few and far between on this project, and it was nothing that really wanted me, and there was nothing here that I felt really warranted any time that I revisited it. I felt like I was liking it less and less the more that I spun it. You know, I thought it was average, but the more time that I've sat with it, the more that I've just kind of stewed in this pod of mediocrity, it's got me so much less into this, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I think that this is a very not good record, in my opinion. I'm sure that it'll have its fans. I feel like those that really enjoy the sounds for the first record and don't mind them a little more mellowed out, I feel like you might enjoy this. You know, I'm sure diehard Killswitch fans will like parts of this, but it's just not something that I'm driving with quite as much. I'm going to be giving it a 3 out of 10. I really didn't like this thing. I thought it was pretty dull. In this quiet town. The Killers had announced that they were going to be doing a quick turnaround follow-up to Imploding the Mirage. Runaway, fantastic record from last year. I really adored that, and I loved the sort of way that they interpolated more old-school 80s rock sounds into their core sound. I loved the production on that record. The songwriting was really good. And with this follow-up, I'm shocked at how much I'm also liking this, because I think that this record is just as good, similarly to King's Disease 2, as Imploding the Mirage, but it focuses more and cohesively ties together lyrical threads even more so than on Imploding the Mirage in a way that I think is fantastic. You know, the production on this is just as good. You know, the tracks like the intimacy on Runaway Horses is felt so very well. The airiness on Desperate Things, and the way that they interpolate sort of some 80s synth styles into that lushness again, like on In the Car Outside or on Sleepwalker. You know, the 80s alternative side that feels like it crops up on Cody and on parts of Quiet Town just erupt in such a great way. This record sonically is so cohesive, and these interview portions that cut the beginning of some of these songs do a great job at sort of planting seeds to help these themes of reflection in a small town and life in a small town, marrying your high school sweetheart, you know, just generally feeling that small town life that I've seen some people live through flourish out even harder, I think is executed fantastically. And it sort of enhances that intimate feel that I talked about on that Phoebe Bridgers collaborative track as well. just everything about the intro stuff, I feel like just does a lot for the record conceptually. This is also just as good at sort of, again, bringing in some of that Springsteen worship, and while also tying it into other old school 80s rock style, that Heartland rock style, bleeds really well throughout this project. The hooks are still great on here. Like I said, Quiet Town is a bop. The way that Brandon Flowers' falsetto rings on the title track also hits in a really good way. I don't know, this record's great. I honestly enjoy this a hell of a lot. And similarly to Nas, I'm glad that the Killers, a rock band that have been around for about 20 years now, are continuing to drop, great records even in a back-to-back sort of sense. I think this record is really, really good. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Fantastic stuff. It's very intimate in the best way possible.
Being that statistic, I was doomed to be. Hearts far too heavy.
New York veteran Ka dropped a surprise new record to me, A Martyr's Reward, follow-up to last year's Descendants of Cain. And with this, Ka seemingly ditches a lot of the overall allegorical style to his writing. He's raps in the perspective of Greek tragedy, biblical epics, samurais. This pulls back a lot of that and just gives you his perspective in life in a way that I think is very well executed. The beats on here all feel very Ka, if you're familiar with a lot of his stuff at this point. It's very smooth and mellow to match Ka's really cold and smooth flow. Ka is an incredible writer. I got into Ka back in 2016 with Honor Kill the Samurai, and I've loved all the stuff that I've heard him on. I think that he's a great writer. I found recently some of his singles from the 90s when he was starting to really make stuff, and that stuff was also mind-blowing. I've been in a real Ka mood, so it's nice to have this new record out there. And I feel like even though he's stripping back a lot of the higher concepts, the consistency is still felt throughout this record, where they're really setting the stage and engaging and capturing the listener with everybody up, or the evolution of hip-hop as a whole in I Need All That, where he gives his perspective on seeing hip-hop grow and his piece within that. Really getting into the nitty-gritty details on PWH in a way that just puts you right into his eyes. He opens his verse with, I ain't make this environment just painting the pictures. If you ain't spreading love, you're painting with sickness. With a stern face, learn grace, replaced hate with indifference. Dude, the just vivid way he chops up emotionally puts you in his perspective so well. I love Ka as a rapper. I think that he's really consistent. Some would say that he's very esoteric or he's very idiosyncratic with how mellow he keeps it, but I feel like it's to his credit. It really lets his words hit a good emotional resonance with the listener. The way his multi-stage songs, We Living and Martyr, or Enough Praise and Recovering, flow into each other is just magical. How he talks about the missteps and misfortunes seen in Greed on Be Grateful. Excellent stuff. He's just a well-spoken rapper that I really enjoy hearing his stuff. And A Martyr's Reward is just more of a showcasing of that in the best way possible. If you like Ka, you'll like this record. Plain and simple. It's getting an 8 out of 10.
3 times when you feel it kicking in that side.
So if you talk to me or you've heard me talk about her music in any capacity, you would know I don't hate Lorde, but I'm not all aboard the Lorde train. I enjoy some of her songs here and there from Pure Heroine. I thought the record wasn't quite holistically a great package. I would almost honestly comparatively compare it to my feelings on Billie Eilish's debut. And similarly to Billie, I thought that Lorde capitalized on her potential a lot better on melodrama. I thought the production on that record, tenfold, was much better. I thought that the emotional climaxes hit a lot harder. And I feel like what minimalism was there was harnessed really well. With that in mind, I did not like this new record, Solar Power, all that much at all. I was immediately turned away from the first single, to be honest, and it gave me very anti-hope, anti-hype for Solar Power itself as a record, because while that song focuses on a slow burn, something that a lot of the record tries to sort of build upon this minimalism slow burn style, it's held back on almost every occasion that the record's trying to present with it. On the title track, it was very distracting that the album, or that the song was heavily inspired by Loaded, both in chord progression, climax and groove in the climax, or resolution drop, if you will, and lyrical subject matter that felt sort of also tied into that we want to be free to do what we want to do, and we want to be loaded and have a good time. That was from the Primal Scream classic, but in a far less gratifying fashion. I thought the song was pretty dull, and it's shocking to me that the record by and large embodies that, partially because Jack Antonoff worked with Lorde on Melodrama, and they made some magic, and Jack Antonoff has been firing off all over this year, and he has produced one of my favorite records of the year, the new St. Vincent. The lush psychedelics that he infused in there worked really well on there, not so much on Solar Power. You know, and it's funny, after hearing the title track on here, because it's so early in the record, I just kept sitting and waiting in every song, waiting for that drop, and time after time, with the exception of the track Fallen Fruit, the synthetic textures that crop in on there actually add a lot to the dynamics, and I don't necessarily hate the drop in Secrets from a Girl Who's Seen It All. I think that it, again, is better than, say, the dullness on The Man with the Axe, or California's almost seemingly copy and paste approach to its drop from the title track, or just, again, how lifeless and hollow some of these sounds, some of these minimalist-driven songs sound. You know, I feel like this record's supposed to feel like you're basking in the sun rays while a band plays off in the distance, but the more that I sit with this record, the more that becomes this glaring sort of distraction, because the points where the instrumentation does come in, I don't completely hate. Again, I think that the tracks that I think it works really well. But what's here, the skeleton of this record, still feels like it's missing some components to keep the listener invested in throttling throughout its runtime. And part of that also has to do with Lorde. I don't think that she's writing anything that I feel like comes close to the resonance felt on Melodrama or even Pure Heroine. You know, while she seemingly was trying to figure out her own way through life while bestowing her own slices of wisdom, some of that feels stripped away in the pursuit of comfort. And that's fine. I'm happy that Lorde seemingly is in a good place, or is writing from a healthy place at points. I feel like it just doesn't have a whole lot of resonance with me. You know, a lot of the reflections about the fame and all that sort of stuff, and her perspective from within fame, I feel so removed from, that a lot of the personal charm that I felt on those two records, it just feels vacant. You know, this record is even a disappointment to me, as somebody who doesn't necessarily love Lorde. I was hoping that something more would come out of this. I was hoping to like a little more than the songs that I did enjoy, or that I would like the songs that I enjoy more than the ones that I do here. You know, and it's a shame, because again, a lot of that personal feeling that I feel like having an intimate soundscape like this would have feels stripped away, and it could be because Lorde's perspective is so distant from where she was before, that gap is felt more between performer and fan. Or it could just be because the uninteresting stuff that coded her earlier work feels like it crops up more on Solar Power. I'm not sure in my brain which it really is. I just know that I don't necessarily enjoy it quite as much as those records. I think this record is pretty not good. And my score is going to reflect that. I'm going to be giving it a 2 out of 10. I really didn't like this thing. Because even the songs that I like have some of those production ideals that I think are kind of dull and don't carry me throughout the experience consistently, cohesively. One of my favorite bands that I discovered in the 2010s, Turnstile, dropped their third record, Glow On, recently, and I am very excited about it, because I've loved this band's output thus far. I got into them through the first listening log, like I was just combing through new music. I heard Nonstop Feeling get some hype and loved that record. I reviewed its follow-up, Time and Space, on the channel. It was one of my albums of the year that it came out. And when I heard TLC, Turnstile Love Connection, I had loved what I was hearing, but I'd wished I hadn't heard it. Because if I had heard the shimmery synths that welcome this record on the opener Mystery before their brand of hardcore infused sounds creeps in underneath that and creates this great marriage of that, I would have shat a brick. Not too dissimilar to what went on in the news recently. This album is fantastic across the board. You know, there's still that hardcore edge on a track by and large that still hits incredibly hard, like on the 1-2 punch of Blackout and Don't Play. Endless sounds like something right out of Encino Man. That early 90s edge that these guys are trying to tap into is still channeled at its core, but they're bringing in such a great influence from dreamier aspects that suit their sound a lot better than it may sound on paper. A band mirroring early 90s hardcore styles getting dreamy, what would that even amount to? Tracks like Wild World, Turnstile Love Connection, like I said, and the opener Blackout. The closer, Lonely Desires, is weaving in and out of the hardcore with the dreamy, creating this wave-like experience, is absolutely serene, and it opens the door for them to go even softer at points in this record, like on the fantastic Underwater Boy or Alien Love Call. You know, the collaborations with Blood Orange on this record, by and large, are knocked out of the park. This record's production is great because the hardcore stuff still feels like expansions on Time and Space, modernizing that sound and those guitar tones really, really well with a good crunch and thunderous drums. But that dreamy synth that feels very ripped out of a VHS tape is infused so perfectly with that I love this record. It's such a fantastic release that I'm glad signifies this band as having a successful hat trick. They did it, everybody. They're going up there with the ranks of Idols and Kyron Earsay as bands from the 2010s pulled it together, baby. This record's fantastic, easily their best, which is shocking to say, and I'm giving this a 10 out of 10. I gave Time and Space a 9, and I really like that record. I still feel like it's a 9, but this record right here, it's too good. It's too good. And I wasn't originally going to sit with that. I was going to put it at a 9. But the more that I sat with it, the more I was like, you know what? This is actually perfect. This is in a complete experience. Similarly to Daddy's Home and similarly to Sinners Get Ready. This record just embodies a vibe holistically and executes it tenfold. It expands the band's sound in ways that are very gratifying to hear. The melody stuff and the aggressive stuff just fit like a puzzle. This record's easily one of the best I've heard of this year, hands down. Halsey, an artist that I've been very vocal about not really enjoying a lot of the music of collectively. I discussed her last record. I didn't really like it as much as my peers. I feel like while it did have pockets where it was trying to sort of branch out, it still felt like business as usual for Halsey, a little too much for me. But with this new record, we've got an interesting development in Halsey's career. She got a record with Trent and Atticus, 9 Inch Nails, my favorite band. That was weird to see, but obviously it got my interest peaked and got me to listen to her newest record, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, a record that sees Halsey tackling her reflections on being pregnant and dealing with being Halsey while in this change of life. And I feel like Trent and Atticus made much better backdrops that enhanced a lot of Halsey's vulnerability tenfold on this project. I still don't love this record, but I like it a lot more than Manic. You know, and it's not even just the parts that feel like Trent and Atticus producing music for a pop singer to sing on, which sounds like an insane concept, but it works really well on the slow burn within Bells of Santa Fe, the heavier aggressive synthetic propulsion on Easier Than Lying, the way that they juxtapose her sharp produced voice with this soft, again, sort of slow burn intimacy on whispers. You know, all of those moments that feel like Trent and Atticus check marks hit the marker for sure, but there's moments that see them like harnessing their own sonic palette to do different styles that I was really excited to see, because the landscape of pop now, it's a scattershot sort of thing. Artists are going to tap into different aesthetics, but there's some that do these hodgepodge of genre infusions, and it was really cool to see Trent and Atticus produce stuff for an artist like that, and I feel like there's instances where they sort of melded either their sounds or production style with a genre switch up, like on the Groove of Lilith. It feels like very much a laid-back pop tune, but the way the drum production hits, it's still very Trent and Atticus, and it fits really well together. Or on the sort of aggressive shoegazy eruption of "You Asked for This." You know, those are sonic moments where I feel like the boys are branching out and trying to fit Halsey, and Halsey sort of meets him halfway, and they create a harmonious marriage. You know, I really like the vulnerable build. I like how the lyrics are portrayed on 1121 as well, or how she sort of talks about her mentality and her own problems while carrying a child. You know, I think that a lot of this works in a lot of ways that I was hoping it would, and in ways that genuinely surprised me. I don't think everything hits. You know, while they're definitely trying to harness a little bit of grunginess on Honey, I don't think it melds all that well personally. I don't like Girl is a Gun either. I think that they're trying to do that whole fusion of their soundscape with Halsey, and I don't think it works as well on that track. I think the guitar production and intimacy on Darling also kind of sets the track back a little bit for me as well. I like the lyrics on that song, but I feel like that's a point where even Halsey sort of does better than the production that she's put underneath. But like I said, this record still nets positive in how it hits and how well these two creative forces sort of synergize together creatively. You know, I don't mind the prospect of Trent and Atticus producing for more people. I'm actually really happy to see that. And in fact, it has me curious as to seeing them do other creative ventures, like producing for other pop stars or other bands, even as like a creative unit. Or hell, doing another How to Destroy Angels album. I would love that, because I thought Welcome Oblivion was fantastic. And while I think Halsey is a weird choice in some regards, she's not in others. And I feel like, again, they form this good bond where clearly Trent and Atticus saw something in her songs that she was writing, and I felt like did an amicable job at creating a palette, by and large, that suits Halsey incredibly well. You know, like I said, still far from my favorite thing. It's got its issues, but it's still really solid. And I feel like if you like Halsey, or if you like Trent and Atticus, this is some morbid curiosity shit. I've said in the past that I like some of Atticus Ross's production for other bands, and Trent's obviously done his thing, and I'd like to see them do more of this, honestly, because I thought this was really cool, and I felt like could have potentially challenged them in ways that are exciting to see as a fan of their work. But I'm going to give this record a 6, because it's not perfect, but it's damn solid. A lot more solid than Manic was, in my opinion. While I can appreciate a band softening up a bit or trying to focus on an aspect of their sound more so than others, I feel like for Deafheaven, they're more focused on shoegaze and stripping back of the aggression scene on some of their more critically praised material, like Sunbather or its follow-up that I really enjoyed. I can't say that Infinite Granite really delivers on something across the board that I find all that interesting. In fact, I think some of the production on here is so fucking normal, or at least so very stock, in a way that greatly detracts from what made them more sonically interesting in the first place. You know, it really feels like at points like on Lament for Wasps or Other Language or Mombasa or even in Blur that they're trying to create this sort of slow dive / maybe Kyron Earsay influenced approach to shoegaze. The overall blandness of a lot of the key components of their production really set it back from anything great. Namely, the drums. The drum production on this record, by and large, I think is incredibly flaccid. You know, while I think the guitars get to shine at points, like on some of the tracks I mentioned, or the points when the overall song melts down, like in the gnashing, or in the tail end of the track, Villain, those moments really shine. But by and large, a decent amount of the production here just feels very bland. And while I don't mind the ambiguity within the vocal production as well, I feel like this record sorely needs something else to spice up the mix on this by and large. You know, like I said, the guitars, when they get to be airy or big, or on moments where the harsh vocals come in and they sort of sit underneath the guitars in this sort of warming presence, it gives me something that maybe I wouldn't necessarily go to for Deafheaven, but I'm appreciating seeing them still show off in their sonic palette. They only spice up what is a very bland record at its core. A very lifeless, sort of lumbering, shoegaze influenced beast that doesn't dazzle as much as I was hoping. Because I like, again, some of the moments of spaciness and airiness. Like, I don't think Neptune Raining Diamonds is that bad of a song. I think the hook of Great Massive Color sort of showcases what they were trying to go for. You know, I just almost wish that the guitars crunched a little more to make those choruses hit more. They could have bridged more of a Smashing Pumpkins style approach to this that I think could have benefited them greatly. The guitars needed more bite if those vocals were going to be dipping into cleaner realms. You know, something else needed to grab the listener instead of just seeing them get washed over. You know, and it's unfortunate, because I do like Deafheaven a lot. I think that they've had some really good records in their past. Infinite Granite just isn't one of them. You know, sure, it's got highlights, but it ultimately left me very, very cold. About as cold as the blue on the cover of this album itself. And it'll be definitely on my worst of the year list. Easily one of the most disappointing records I've heard this year. So far, I'm going to be giving this a 4 out of 10. Because again, it has highlights, but it's set back greatly by some of its foundational missteps. The last album I checked out this month was a request from Rockin' Movies with Tyler, the new Between the Buried and Me album, Colors 2. A record that I wouldn't say I was, like, geeked about. I don't hate Between the Buried and Me. Out of all the bands he requested, they were the only one that I was familiar with. And, I like weird stuff. So, like, I enjoy their golden era of stuff, for sure. I wouldn't say that I'm, like, the diest hard fan. I just listen to other weird stuff more. I like the first Colors. You know, I think that it's good. And I think that I was curious to see what they would do to explore more concepts in the future. And I mean, this one's alright. It's a bit more forward with a lot of its seemingly emotional resonances, or how it sort of portrays themes and stuff, which is fine. I think that the craziest thing about this record isn't any of that. It's more the production. I think the production on this record is fucking weird. It's like 2007, 2008, this era. Even like some shit in 2010 I'd listened to had sounded like this. It's like the production style never fucking left. A lot of the guitar production on here is so just concrete, you know, in a way that was really refreshing to hear. You know, it's not like I crave this sound, but it was cool to hear in like 2021 with new music behind it. You know, I liked the drums on this record in particular. I mean, Fix the Error alone has this really fun build-up, but the drum solo on that is fucking bonkers. You know, it's got maybe the one thing setting it back as far as how that production sounds. Some of the keyboard tones, like the organs that open, I think it's Stare Into the Abyss, are fine. But like some of the texturing on the double helix of Extinction and some of its passages have like synthetic backdrops that feel like the most detractory from anything else that the sonics on this record have going on. And some of the softer moments just didn't really hit me in a way that I was enjoying. But I do still like a decent amount of this record. I think it's really solid. You know, I feel like if you like Between the Buried and Me, you'll probably like components of this. You'll like how wacky it gets. You know, the fun, like, laid-back, jazzier stuff on Revolution to Limbo is really, really cool. I think the synthetics on Sfu Matau are probably some of the best that the record has going on it. It's some pretty decent ambient stuff in the backdrops of that. And overall, the record still throttles in a lane that isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's really solid. You know, I feel like this is probably the most solid metal release I've heard all year. Where normally like Xibalba would sit, this is where this sits with me in that realm of preference. I'm giving it a 7. It's really solid. It's fun. I dug it a decent amount, you know what I mean? And that's going to be the listening log update this month, guys. What did you think about the records that... Wait a minute, how do I have this much video left? I got nothing else. Well, how am I going to fill this time in... Again with this? The Donda alarm's going off. This shit has been going off all week for the last, like, handful of weeks. Because Donda's happening. We're going to check and see if it's live. I'm going to humor the Donda alarm and see if it's even live. And wait a minute. Alright, let's talk about Donda. Kanye did it. He finally dropped Donda, a record that had had so much hype behind it, but felt like it was going to fall to the wayside, similarly to records like TurboGrafx-16 and Yandhi, and yet here it is. After loads of hype, listening parties, live events surrounding this record, people just paid to see Kanye vibe to his own music. That's mind-boggling. And the record itself has this sort of frustrated feeling, and it gives me similar feelings that I get from a record that I think is really underrated in Kanye's discography, The Life of Pablo, a record that seemingly also had a troubled pre-production and was actually revised after Rollout. And in the same breath, given how fucking long Donda is, I wouldn't be surprised if it also got a slimming down in the future at some point if Kanye does his own redacted on Donda. But do I like Donda as much as I do The Life of Pablo? Short answer, no. Long answer, no. I don't like this record nearly as much as that record. I feel like at its core there was something here for fucking sure. You know, I like the stuff that relates to his mom. I like the production on a lot of this record. It feels like a melding of the rawness from The Life of Pablo with the rawness of Yeezus. A lot of the noisier attributes of that production style that he adorned for that I don't think works as well on Yeezus in points, works a lot better on Donda. I feel like the scope is trying to aim for twisted fantasy. I mean, hell, Jail feels like Runaway broken down into 2 parts as a concept and construction, all that sort of stuff. He samples Lauryn Hill on Believe What I Say. Hell, Hurricane with The Weeknd is just another song from Yandhi reworked for this record. You know, this record has a lot going on ambition-wise. It feels like Kanye's trying to do a lot of tying up of loose ends. It feels like he's casting away something, but I just don't like it. You know, while I like the messiness on The Life of Pablo, I don't like the messiness on Donda. I think the pacing on this record is all over the map. I think it lacks a lot of focus. You know, for a guy that I know has a lot going on, this record has a great concept already at its core that is shown off on tracks like the title track or 24. Like, a lot of the gospel feeling on this just enriches a lot of that grief that it feels like he's going through. You know, but then he juxtaposes it with tracks like Jail, both parts. I love Jail Part 1. I think it's got a great Jay-Z verse. I don't know why the fuck it's on this record. Same with Jail Part 2. OK also tackles just Kanye's problematicness, but in a far less endearing way than when Bo Burnham did it on his latest comedy special. You know, this record is just... It's a frustrating record, and I'm swept up in the frustration in a way that really annoys me when I sit down to listen to this, because there are components that I really enjoy on here, at least sonically, with tracks like Jail and Off the Grid and Hurricane, you know, or a lot of the God stuff like 24, Praise God, or Pure Souls, you know, Jesus Lord, the title track, have a lot of this integration of gospelness that feels like what Jesus is King was trying to do, but a lot better. You know, this sees Kanye improving on concepts he toyed with on that record while just trying too hard to recreate every other sonic pastiche he's done over the last 10 years. Not to mention all of that detracting and diverting from the concept as a whole that, again, like I said, had great potential. And it sucks that a lot of my favorite moments are wrapped up in some of those deviations from the concept, but they're really good songs. You know, there's bops, there's songs that I really like. It's way too much. It's almost 2 hours long, and this record doesn't need to be this long. If it seems like I'm very, you know, expressive with this particular review, it's because I see so many people going at this record. You know, I've seen a lot of people talk about this record. I have friends that refuse to talk about this record because they are tired of Kanye, and I get it. As somebody who's been a staunch critic to Kanye, I had an interesting time listening to this record because, again, there's parts that I like, but there's parts that just really aren't good. I don't like God Breathed on this. You know, I think that track is not great. While I think Remote Control has a great hook, it has no place on this fucking record. The record is so scattershot in ways that I just don't like. It's a record that begs to be redacted, and that's coming at some point. I don't know when, but it's coming. A Donda redacted. That's basically it. That's all I got. It's not Kanye's worst, because while it is scattershot, what's great here kills. A lot of the features on this record kill. You know, I already talked about Jay-Z. Lil Yachty has never sounded this good in his life, and he kills it on OK OK. Even if I think the concept strays from the record as a whole, that's a great song. At least Yachty is great on it, you know. I love The Weeknd on Hurricane. I know the other one exists. Aunt Clemens on the original Hurricane was what I was talking about. The song was 80 Degrees on Yachty. I blanked on it when I was talking about it, the specifics, but I wanted to chime in here and mention that. And also say that Kid Cudi killed it on Moon. Moon itself, out of all the divergences and splits off that this record does, Moon is at the peak of it all. It is the best version of that. It's so good. It's so very good. Even the extended stuff from Playboi Carti on Junior Part 2 is really good. There's a lot going on here that I enjoy. It's just wrapped up in a frustrating record. And my score is going to reflect that. I'm giving it a 5. I can't give it less than a 5 because the good stuff is really good. But you got to sift through some real mugginess to get there, in my opinion. I know a lot of people like this record, and I respect that. You like what you like. I just didn't like Donda as much. I like this I like parts of this record, but not others. And that was my review, my listening log update. What did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know in the comments down below. If you did like it, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdy content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to go, though. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have a good day's lives and situations. I'll see you another day.